So here I think I'm finally finished. We got double emphasis, we got triple emphasis on the things of God. Finally, I'm done. Or so I thought. I tried sharing this with some friends and family, and in the process, another rabbit hole. And it felt as if the Lord was in my face, and he is going, you ain't done. There's one more item that is going to press the issue, that's going to illuminate the issue, that's going to triple emphasize the issue of the restoring of time. And it had to do when I was considering the fig tree prophecy. In the fig tree prophecy, Israel sees all the bad things that happen right at the end, including the sun turning dark, moon to blood, all kinds of asteroids and falling stars and asteroids. Asteroids. Where are the asteroids in these dreams? And I'm talking the asteroids that's supposed to strike the earth, that's supposed to cause all these tsunamis, all kinds of dreams like this going around for years. And from people that is on that montage, they had them too. And if they were correct on the ones that I presented you, I think they might be correct on the asteroid dreams they've had as well and the tsunami dreams. And when does the fig tree prophecy conclude? Well, those that are heavily into the prophecy bring up Psalms 90 verse 10 that states that current generations are between 70 and 80 years. Let me read the passage for you. The days of our lives are 60 years and 10, that's 70 years. And if by reason of strength they may be 80 years, that's 80 years. So if that's a generation, then the fig tree generation, well, we're past 70 years, we're coming up on 80. That 80th year would be in the year 2029. And that's Israel. And they will see these alleged asteroid events. Wouldn't that be a 911? And then it hit me again. I saw this YouTube documentary on an asteroid that's just missed us and it's coming back around for a second shot sometime around, I think, 2029. Say it ain't so. Can't be. So I went to my old friend Google and Googled asteroid 2029. And guess what came up? An asteroid named after the god 911, the god of chaos. It's the asteroid Apophis. This was a near-Earth flyby back in 2004. The thing is nearly 4 football fields in length. God only knows how heavy this thing is. It's traveling at 45,000 miles per hour. And it's coming around for a second swipe at us where it'll pass 19 to 20,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. That's lower than some of our satellites. And according to the God science-based community, it could high-five us on April 13th, 2029. And I thought, okay, I'm off the hook. The Bible makes reference to a god of chaos called in the Greek Apollyon, or in the Hebrew Abaddon. Well, I know that's in the book of Revelation. And what passage is that? Revelation 9:11? Yeah, Revelation 9:11. Apollyon, Abaddon. And that's supposed to strike the earth, according to Revelations 9 verse 1. And it's supposed to bust open the earth and all these demons and creatures that come screaming out and afflict mankind. Well, no big deal. In Revelation 9:11, I don't see the word Apophis. Well, the word Apophis is the Egyptian form of Apollyon and Abaddon. Same demon, same god of chaos, just a different dynasty. In Egypt, it too is the god of chaos, and it's a serpent as opposed to a dragon or some other manifestation. It's the serpent god, and it's red. And it is said to battle Ra, which to the Egyptians, Ra was one of the manifestations of the sun, S-U-N, of righteousness, rising with healing in his wings. And I thought, oh no, a third rock. Vesta, Beetlejuice, triple emphasis. I think I need to actually try to prove this wrong, because this is way too surreal. I bet if I look up April 13th, it's a nothing burger calendar event. There's nothing happening on that day that would indicate this is an appointed time of God, or a Rosh Hashanah event, or a Passover, or a Pentecost event. Let's say April 13th. Okay, it'll whittle that down to sometime around Passover. So I went to Google, looked up Passover 2029. And based on all the stuff I've been harping at you about the grain and when the first day of the month of Aviv in Passover is actually determined with the harvest and the first fruit offering, well, knowing that Google would just dial into the Hebrew corrupted calendar and method of determining Passover, you simply find that date that Google gives you and add a month. Automatic, because here I'm focusing on Passover. That is God's first appointed time. That is the most important. Everything's going to be done around Passover, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. It's Passover. And what did Google give me? Friday, March 30th. I'm off the hook because if I add a lunar month, that's going to come out to be about April 28th, 29th. In fact, I'm going to go check it on my moon phase calendar. Yep, there it is. Full moon, April 28th, 2029. That's got to be the true Passover for that year. And that's far from the April 13th that this asteroid Apophis is supposed to be flying by. And it got heavily impressed upon me. You're looking at the wrong appointed time. The issue being pressed is Rosh Hashanah, which is the foundation of all the appointed times of God. This is the first day of the head of the year of when the barley is harvested, which determines Passover, Pentecost, trumpets, tabernacles, all of them. It determines all of them. It's Rosh Hashanah, which is about 2 weeks before Passover, which is about the middle of April in this year, which is, that ain't the 13th, is it? Oh, no, it's not. The crescent moon will be illuminated enough for the naked eye to see on April 14th. Then what's April 13th? April 13th of the year 2029 is the last day of the Shemitah, the 7-year period, which starts this May 1st, May 2nd of the year 2022. It's the last day. And what follows the last day of any Shemitah? What follows is the first day of the next 7 years of the next Shemitah. The focus being on God's true Rosh Hashanah and God's events being applied and started on God's Rosh Hashanah, not the Hebrew perverted calendar that puts it on the first day of the 7th month. Again, I say the word Rosh Hashanah is only used once in the entire Bible, and that is in Exodus 12:2, where God said, Moses, this is your Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month of the harvest of the barley, on the month Passover falls, on the month you came out of Egypt, this is your Rosh Hashanah. So don't you think God's going to apply all his feasts according to that Rosh Hashanah and not on a month that God called the 7th month and gave no title to at all, but the Hebrews gave a pagan god title to, the month of Tishri? God is pressing this issue. Rosh Hashanah, first day of the month of the Aviv barley, the month that Passover is to be observed. This is the foundation of all his appointed times. And it looks like he's going to punctuate it by dropping a rock on our head. The God of chaos, the God of 911 as expressed in Revelation 9:11. And before we take one more step, we should probably consider the fact that John the Revelator called out this asteroid by name 2,000 years ago. I'm thinking John doesn't even know what an asteroid is, much less who the God of chaos is. And he certainly had nothing to do with numbering scriptures and plotting out this particular verse to be 911. And just to amplify this a tad bit, John's generation didn't know what the term 911 meant, nor did the generation that canonized scripture and gave this particular verse 911. 911, that's a product of our generation. And yet, there it is, 911. Kind of seems to me that God threw a prophetic in there without us noticing. You got Apophis, the god of chaos. You got Abaddon and Apollyon. They're equals, just in a different dynasty. They're gods of chaos. We got 911 everywhere. If you're struggling seeing the prophetic connection, then I really don't know what to tell you. This stuff is all way above John's pay grade and his understanding. Yet he calls this asteroid by name 2,000 years ago. Now, if that isn't prophetic, nothing is. My point is, the book of Revelation is prophetic on a scale that we can't comprehend just from this fact alone. And I don't think it was the religious community that named this asteroid Apophis. I'm quite confident the scientific community did that, and probably long before that this asteroid was such a near-Earth object. And nobody could see this thing coming by on the last day of the Shemitah on April 13th, which would end that 7-year Shemitah, and the next day would start the new Shemitah. Certainly not John 2,000 years ago, nor anybody in the scientific community. Yet here it's unfolding before our very eyes. And the emphasis is on God's Rosh Hashanah that he gave to Moses. So even though the scientific community thinks that Apophis will miss the earth, chapter 9 of the book of Revelation appears to paint a different picture. And I believe this is also reflected in Revelation 12, where it says Satan is cast out of heaven, that great red dragon, the serpent god, the red serpent, Satan, cast down to the earth, followed by 3.5 years of the remnant of God fleeing into the wilderness, being persecuted by Satan and his hordes who have been cast down to the earth. You get it? Apophis being cast to the earth, the asteroid hitting the earth. That's Satan, the serpent god, the red serpent god, cast down to the earth. Now he knows he has a little time left, so he's persecuting the remnant that's left behind because the bride's been taken. And I think at that point, when that rock hits the earth, when Apophis hits the earth, the man-child's taken up. And that, I believe, is Thyatira, because Thyatira has a rod of iron in its description, in its narrative. And you see that man-child church being caught up to God, and it has a rod of iron. So I think the two connect. Thyatira is the man-child. And I think that's speaking towards the 144,000. So anyway, what does this red serpent that's going after the church now for 3.5 years, what does it belch out of its mouth? Well, Revelation 12:15, and the serpent casts out of his mouth water as a flood. Doesn't cast out a flood like a river overflowing type flood. It casts out water as a flood after the woman, that may cause her to be carried away by the flood. Well, what do you think's going to happen if an asteroid the size of 4 football fields, traveling at 45,000 miles an hour, hits the Atlantic, or splits in two, and half of it hits the Atlantic and half of it hits the Pacific? You're going to have some pretty big tsunamis, possibly hundreds of feet high. And that tsunami is going to hit every coastline that borders those oceans. There's your flood. And what stops the flood? The earth. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon, now it's called the dragon, cast out of his mouth. And what some of these asteroid dreamers have narrated from their dreams is that there's going to be tsunamis, and they're going to wash up to the mountain ranges that are inside the coastline. That is a spot-on and perfect representation of the dynamics which this earth would see if it's hit by an asteroid the size of Apophis. It's perfectly narrated. And I thought, no way. Oh, no way. This is too perfect. This is too surreal. This is, if this is the case, this is the third emphasis on Rosh Hashanah. And God's Rosh Hashanah being the first day of the month of the Aviv of the barley wheat. And I felt in my heart as if God said, throw me a fleece. Make it a good one. You remember the story of the fleece with Gideon? Put the fleece out twice. Do this and then do this, and I know then your anointing is upon me, O Lord, and we can go forward. Well, you find out that Gideon was out threshing and winnowing the barley wheat when the angel showed up and all this started to happen. When do you winnow and thresh the wheat? At Rosh Hashanah. And he put the fleece out on the barley threshing floor. Rosh Hashanah. I don't know about you, but I think God's really trying to tell me something. Rosh Hashanah. His Rosh Hashanah. Okay, let me dream up an incredible, impossible fleece for you to answer, O Lord. And I know he's laughing at me the whole time. I said, let's take that fully waned, zero illumination moon on the last day of the Shemitah that we are currently in. That would be April 30th, at that solar eclipse that we've been looking at, that the prophet Malachi could certainly been pointing to in Malachi 4:1 and 2, the Son of Righteousness rising with healing in its wings. And that's a messianic prophecy of the return of Christ. Let's take that fully waned zero illumination moon and let's compare it to one 7 years later on April 13th, which is the last day of that Shemitah, and the day that precedes the new beginnings and the new starting of the next Shemitah, which would be on April 14th of the year 2029. Let's take those two fully waned moons and let's compare the elevations. Because that's what you did in T's dream. You had those two orbs that were red and on fire face to face, and their elevations were within 1 degree of each other, which is totally, galactically impossible. That was impossible, but that will happen as presented by Stellarium. That was no coincidence that she saw these two orbs at the exact same elevation, off by 1 degree. Who's counting? Lord, do the same thing here. Here's your fleece. I got Stellarium to check your work, oh Lord. He's still laughing at me. Because Lord, if I'm going to stick my neck out on this has got to be solid. This has to be proven, and other people need to have that opportunity and that ability to check this. Because I'm not an interpreter of dreams. I'm not getting this from a vision or an anointed voice in my head, or I ate too much pizza the night before and I'm having a pizza prophetic dream. I want to see you top this one. This is the fleece of all fleeces. And you already answered so many of them. I mean, it's incredible. Vesta, Beetlejuice, all this stuff. These things are all impossible. But It's all lining up. This one, this fleece. Let's see it top all these other fleeces. And that way I know you're pointing to your Rosh Hashanah and to your greater Gideon, which is Christ. And Christ, who will take just a handful of people and he's going to take out all the armies coming to Armageddon. There's your greater Gideon. There's your sun god of righteousness with healing in his wings, which is pointing back to the solar eclipse I keep talking about on April 30th, and the new Shemitah starting in the new Rosh Hashanah on May 2nd of 2022. Here's your fleece, Lord. Let's see the elevations match. Let's see you move the heavens for your only begotten, for your son Jesus, and for his bride. Move the heavens once again. And you do that by showing that these two moons are at the same elevation, even after 7 years apart in distance of time. 7 years distance in time. Same elevation. There, guys, have I said it enough? So I dialed up Stellarium. This is the azimuth and altitude for the partial solar eclipse on April 30th of this year. And I highlighted the azimuth and the altitude so you can see it. And this is as close as I could get to zero illumination of the moon, because just a couple minutes before or after the zero illumination can make a big difference in those numbers. Now here's the moon 7 years later on April 13th, 2029, at the closest phase I could find to zero illumination. Check out these numbers. The difference between the two altitudes is like about 1 degree. That is insanely impossible. Normally after a month or 3, the moon at a zero illumination of some other month will be on the other side of the planet. The azimuths are almost identical as well. They're only off by a couple degrees. And I went 7 years back from 2022, and I went 7 years ahead from 2029, just to see if there is some pattern that I need to know about. And no, there wasn't. The moons on those two dates have the moon on the other side of the planet. And here's a picture of the two moons 7 years apart, where they're going to be in the sky if you were down on the southern tip of South America or Antarctica. What you're seeing is their location in the sky above the horizon. They are basically on top of each other. So in a nutshell, their locations are nearly identical. This is totally impossible. But this is the fleece that I had in my mind to put before the Lord. I'm sure he put it there, and that's fine. But I understand the magnitude and the gravity of these moons being in such close proximity 7 years apart. It's galactically impossible. Yet there they are, practically on top of each other, and the fleece was answered by God. It doesn't get any more prophetic than that. And I could hear God laughing at me. Or was it he was laughing with me because I was laughing too? I mean, this is totally impossible, and yet there it is on Stellarium. I would count that as a confirmation from the Lord that this stuff's going to happen. I mean, Gideon only had a fleece to work with. Here the Lord has the moon to work with, 7 years apart. And I thought, Gideon's fleece has nothing on this, and God set me up, and he's having way too much fun with this at my expense. An expense I would happily pay, because here I am tag teaming with him in this rabbit hole and coming up with just incredible things. Not prophetic on my part, but I think being led of the Spirit through all these trips down all these rabbit holes as he's leading me from point A to point B to point C and coming up with this information. And in the process, I'm seeing Bible is being fulfilled. I can see it through Stellarium. I see it clearly. It is real. It is authentic. It can be predicted by anybody who wants to download Stellarium into the computer and find out for themselves. There it is. And it looks like the fifth trumpet of the 7 trumpets of Revelation is going to be fulfilled on April 13th, 2029. That's your Revelation 9:11. On the last day of the Shemitah of the 7-year, tribulation maybe? The last day of 7 years, which is triggered by the Rosh Hashanah, I'm thinking that's the taking of the bride, the first out translation. At the end of this Shemitah, the man-child with the rod of iron, which is Thyatira, the church that has the rod of iron, it's taken out then, which I think is 144,000. That's the second out translation. This would be the wedding party, the best men, the groomsmen, and the 5 wise virgins who are not the bride, followed by 3.5 years of the remnant being chased through the wilderness by the serpent, the red dragon, Apophis, that was cast from heaven. And at the end of that 3.5 years, the Lord speaks to them and says, "Unbow yourself and look up, for your redemption draws nigh." You have watched all these things. You have seen all these things. You've been under all these things, that if the days have not been shortened, no flesh would survive. But for the sake of the elect, you are the elect, the guests at the wedding, the elect. For your sake I shorten those days. So unbow yourself, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. Come on, guys, look at the narratives. When Jesus said, 2 will be in the field, 2 at the mill, 2 sleeping, they're not being bowed over because of their 9-to-5 job. Those that are bowed over are under the persecution and the prosecution of the Antichrist system. So the 2 in the field and 2 at the mill, etc., are taken before the Antichrist system is fully engaged. Once it's engaged, those that are left behind to get a fire lit under their bottom side, to get them red hot for Jesus, they are being prosecuted and persecuted. And when that has worked its perfect work, then Jesus will come back for them. But the bride's already gone. Multiple out translations. It only makes sense. You don't unbow yourself and look up because you're having a bad day at work. Those would be the 2 in the field, 2 at the mill, 2 sleeping. The ones that are taken are those who already have a red-hot relationship with the Lord. They are taken out and kept from the fire, the testing that will come upon the entire earth. Church of Philadelphia, Revelations 3, 10 and 11. And verse 9 says why she is kept out. Because he loves her. She has a Song of Solomon relationship with her heavenly bridegroom. But the guests for the wedding are not the Church of Philadelphia. Only the Church of Philadelphia is kept out of that hour. There are 6 other Revelation churches that don't meet that criteria. My guess is that because they are sleepy and or lazy, God's going to put it through a fire to get them red hot. They're not going up in the first alt translation, that being the taking of the bride. This can only equate to multiple alt translations. And there's precedent in the Bible for that. We have Enoch, we have Elijah, we have Christ, we have those that rose with Christ. We probably have people the Bible doesn't even talk about. So we have already seen multiple alt translations. So we need to get off this pre-trib, post-trib, pan-trib. I'm going to punch you in the face if you don't believe my pre-trib. And, Christians are going at each other over this stuff. It is what it is. It will be what it will be. And you ain't got it figured out. And neither do I, for that matter. But I think things are coming into focus. What a waste of time to be battling one another as to what rapture is what rapture. Ain't gonna matter if you got the heart of the bride for your heavenly Solomon, Jesus. You're too focused on chasing after him than trying to figure out all this intellectual garbage, which is causing division and making us all look like fools because we just make faceplant after faceplant when you try to dial in a rapture date. Get your heart pursuing Christ. And of course, don't you know, we need a double emphasis surrounding this Revelation 9:11 Apophis hitting the earth storyline. You just know God's going to establish one because that's how he rolls. Because when something is emphasized twice by God, it's as if there are 2 witnesses testifying that these things are so. A 2 emphasis is a 2 witness. And since it's God that's giving these emphasis, these are his witnesses. And right on cue, God dropped into that rabbit hole. Will these rabbit holes never end? Hopefully not. And what he brought me were a couple of moon dreams that I kind of placed over on the side because I didn't know what to do with them. Yet something told me these things have significance. Don't throw them away. These are not pizza prophecies. And the Lord walked me through it, and now I'm going to walk you through it. And it matches the Revelation 9:11 Apophis storyline and the God science rendering where when this rock hits, it's going to produce these tsunamis that'll be swallowed up or stopped by mountain ranges. Because in these 3 dreams, there is language that matches the fig tree prophecy where it states in Psalms 90 verse 10 and 11, we will fly away. And here we have the word tsunami being mentioned, which is quite the accurate match for the serpent casting a flood out against the woman in Revelation 12. A world event, a world dynamic you would expect if an asteroid the size of Apophis hit our oceans. So right off the bat, it looks like these things connect, that they're talking the same talk, walking the same walk, given the same storyline. So true to character, in my rabbit hole, I was challenged and I dug into these 3 dreams and they fit. They fit perfectly. They matched up perfectly with this Apophis date of April 13th, 2029. So take a look, take a listen, I'll comment, and maybe you want to note there are 3 dreams. That's a triple witness, triple emphasis in God's book.
Like looking at the sky, and it was like kind of afternoon, and it was sunny, and we were looking at the sky, and in the sky was a moon, and we were all staring at the moon, and this other moon came out of nowhere and came up beside it. And we're all just staring at this moon, and then all of a sudden, one of the moons turns red.
So I thought, oh wow, I opened the window just far enough and I could fit my body out and fly away. So I did, and I fit my body out and flew away. And I noticed something really weird about the sky. Right in front of me, there was a purple moon, and to the side, there was a blue moon.
I was outside and looked up at the sky, which it was still daylight, and saw not only our moon, but two more. All three were full. Our moon was an off-white color, but the two others were, one was light blue, and the other was a light green. The weirdest part was the two moons started to move really fast, and I remember I was trying to take a photo, and then everyone was running because there was a huge tsunami coming towards us.
What's so special about the first dream? It's daytime. Hint, hint. Daytime. And they see two bright full moons. Daytime for both of them. That's the key to unlock the message and the calendar event that this is referring to. This cannot be talking about that I see a moon, then I don't see a moon, then I do see a moon. Oh, that's a lunar eclipse. This is not talking about a lunar eclipse. Yet it is, a few seconds later when he sees a blood moon, there is your lunar eclipse. But the two moons he sees during the daytime cannot be a lunar eclipse because the moon in that state is not in the shadow of the earth that causes the lunar eclipse. But one of those moons will be a blood moon. Only it will turn to blood later in the night after the sun goes down and the moon rises in the heavens. In the middle of the night, it becomes a blood moon. But the two full moons he initially sees has to be speaking about two moons in the same month, and the second moon will be a blood moon. And there's only 1 month on the calendar that we are currently facing, as far as my eye can see, when going to Stellarium and searching for a month with two moons where they both rise before the sun sets. And there's only 1 month between the 3 blood moon tetrads that have been working, that being in 2014, 2015, the second being the one we're currently in, the third being in the year 2032, 2033. There's only 1 month on the calendar where that occurs, and that's the month of December 2028, as this next Shemitah we're coming into is closing down, is coming to an end, only a few months before that April 13th Apophis day. Again, say it ain't so. There's the proof. It's irrefutable. Is that what these other two dreamers are saying? Yes it is. The second dreamer says he sees two moons. One is purple and one is blue.
Right in front of me, there was a purple moon, and to the side, there was a blue moon.
Well, I know what a blue moon is. There are two types. There is a seasonal blue moon, where there is 4 full moons in a season. A season being spring equinox to summer solstice, that's a season. Summer solstice to the fall equinox, that's a season. Fall equinox to the winter solstice, that's a season. And you got 4 seasons. If you have in one of those seasons 4 full moons, that is a seasonal blue moon. The second type of blue moon is when you have 2 full moons in a particular month, and that usually occurs in a month that has 31 days. December of 2028 has 31 days, and it has 2 full moons. And the second moon is a blue moon, and sometime during the night, in its moon phase, it will find itself behind the earth, in full shadow of the earth, and turn into a full blood moon. So take a full blood red moon, which is a blue moon, and add the 2 colors together, you get a purple moon. And I'll reiterate, as a double witness, this is the only time that this happens, either on or between all those 3 blood moon tetrads. That's over 25 years of time. It's not there. We only find it on that December 2028 moon. We don't find it any time else. And this matches the third dream, because she saw a blue moon. And she said both moons that she saw were during the daytime. There's the connection to the first dream. And her first moon was kind of a dirty moon. Well, that's what happens when that moon comes up and it doesn't have the full darkness to reflect bright light through. It's fighting with the atmosphere, so the brightness of the moon is going to be diminished a little bit. It's going to look a little dirty. That's a reality when a full moon actually rises before the sun sets. She nailed it. And I don't think she knows the first thing about moon phases or what atmospheric conditions do to a full moon when it rises before the sun sets. She nailed it. God was giving her specifics that identify and qualify and testify that these are true God science-based dynamics. And what happens in the dream? This slightly dirty moon is followed by a blue moon.
All three were full. Our moon was an off-white color, but the two others were, one was light blue, and the other was a light green.
Well, that's December of the year 2028. Both the moon on the 1st of December and the moon on the 31st December, both will rise before the sun sets, and that second moon is a blue moon. And following that blue moon is a green moon. And we learned in this video, the green moon represents the month of May. Not the moon of May, but it's pointing to the entire month of May. And as the blue moon and the green moon start doing this dance, things are shortening. What? The time is shortening before that blue moon phase and the phase of the moon moving towards the month of May. It's getting close to May, which I think April 13th qualifies. It's close to the month of May. The blue moon is getting close to the green month. And in all three dreams, the storyline that it produces, which is presented by the timeline presented from Stellarium, proves that this is the last couple months of the Shemitah that is about to start here on May 1st, May 2nd of this year. The Shemitah is coming to an end. And what ends that Shemitah? The asteroid Apophis on the last day of that Shemitah, April 13th. So what these three dreamers are seeing is a calendar period of time which boils down to about the month of April 2029, which ends this next Shemitah, starts the next Shemitah, and we got tsunamis, just like our Revelation 9:1:1 and Revelation 12 suggest.
The weirdest part was the two moons started to move really fast, and I remember I was trying to take a photo, and then everyone was running because there was a huge tsunami coming towards us.
They are a perfect match to a triple rock witness that God gave us, as we see through the fulfillment of the dream expressing the asteroid Vesta, and T's dream, which expresses the red giant star we call Betelgeuse, and now the rock Apophis. Triple emphasis, a triple witness, and just another fleece that God answered. This is what this double and triple emphasis are. They are witnesses, they are fleeces being answered by God. And don't forget that within this triple rock emphasis, there are the storylines that God is providing. Three storylines that we can draw from the brightness of the cross, that being the sun, S-U-N, of righteousness, rising with healing in its wings, which we see expressed through the solar eclipse of April 30th, 2022. Then there's the dance of Venus and Jupiter on that same brightness of the cross, and that hot romance points to the Song of Solomon as well. And the third hot romance that we can see is Jupiter chasing Vesta after Vesta produces a cross of its own just before Saturn leaves her to the pursuit of Jupiter. And at the top of the cross, Sirius, which ushers in Betelgeuse, forming a cross as it's tracking from upper right to lower left, and then leveling off, producing a cross when it parallels that period of time expressed by the Shemitah, the Rosh Hashanah, and the super blood moon of Passover of this year, 2022. And if you didn't catch it the first time, Jesus is the bright morning star. And if Betelgeuse pops off, that is going to be your bright morning star spoken of in Revelations chapter 2 and Revelations chapter 22. And Jesus spoke of something like this, a flash of brightness from one end of heaven to the other, tracking from east to west. So that would make an excellent candidate for the bright and morning star that Jesus refers to in the book of Revelation. Jesus would be a type of Jupiter, and Jesus is specifically named by Malachi in Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, as the sun, S-U-N, of righteousness with healing in his wings. That would make the moon a type for the bride of Christ, Venus a type for the bride of Christ, and Vesta a type for the bride of Christ. And this is all reflected and expressed throughout the Song of Solomon. So basically we have the triple emphasis of the brightness of the cross with the bright and morning star at the head of the cross, triple emphasizing the Song of Solomon. In other words, a triple emphasis within a triple emphasis. And it appears that this dance into heaven was written up there before time immemorial, and the dance is all coming into focus. The story is going to be told finally. This is the book of Revelation coming to pass. And some of it is sweet, and some of it is bitter in the belly. The sweetness is that this particular group of people will fly away. That's what the second dreamer says. We will fly away. That's the exact language for the people who find themselves at the end of the fig tree prophecy, which is expressed in Psalms 90 verses 10 and 11. We will fly away. That's what he said. I flew away.
I fit my body up and flew away.
Not I was raptured, not I was taken as the bride. No, it was we will fly away. And that would be sweet, but what's left behind is going to be extremely bitter. Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, these things will happen, and these tribulations that he was prophesying about would be the worst tribulations this world has ever seen or ever will see. That's Deuteronomy 28, the curses upon mankind, the mankind who rejects the covenant of God. I want to experience that sweetness part, but even more so as the bride and not as those who miss the bridehood and settle for being the groomsmen or the bridesmaids that are caught up in Revelations 12 as the man-child with the rod of iron. The word caught up there, by the way, it's the word harpazo or rapture. That's why you will always hear me say the bride is taken and those after that will be snatched or raptured out. Jesus said 2 in the field, 2 at the mill, 2 sleeping. They're not being pressed or chased by the Antichrist system and being thrown into prison and persecuted and martyred. They're working their regular day. Everything's cool. Everything around them is okay. There's no pressing. There is no traumatic environment they're living in, and one's taken. Whereas these other rapture scriptures, it talks about terrible tribulation, beginning of birth pains. The woman of Revelation, she's in pain to be delivered. What does that mean? Tribulation of some level. That's where I come up with multiple out translations. First the bride, followed by the Lord coming back for the bridal party, and he can only do that after a 7-day honeymoon with his bride, because he ain't coming out to bring her to the banquet. He's going to enjoy 7 days with his beautiful bride. Then he'll come out, get the bridal party, and set them in the banquet hall. That's after 7 days. Oh, we got 7 years. See how that lines up? And then I think later on, maybe after, 3.5 years, he's going to come back and get the guests for the wedding, who had no interest in being his bride, who had no interest in being in the bridal party. They're just looking for a free lunch. I mean, Matthew 22, the king who made a feast for his newly wedded son literally had to drag people in as guests of the wedding. And even some of them had the wrong garments on, and the king threw them out. And after that 7-year honeymoon, after that 7-year Shemitah, I believe Christ comes out of the bride chamber and we find him gathering his 144,000, his bridal party, and he goes to war with the armies of the world at Armageddon. Possibly sometime in that 3.5-year period, either at the beginning or at the end. But this all matches the Hebrew betrothal protocol. And Jesus heavily emphasized that protocol throughout his ministry. And that was probably the parable he used the most for end-time events and his relationship with those he loved. So there are your double and triple emphasis. Those are your double and triple witnesses. Those are your double and triple fleeces. All set in the heavens by God, all set in motion by God, all which are coming up before us in the next few months and in the next 7 years, all which might be punctuated by a supernova. You haven't forgot about that supernova, have you? No way to predict if it's going to happen, but if it does, what are you going to do with that? Again, we got plenty of information and plenty of evidence that illuminate these dates we've been talking about. But what if Betelgeuse actually pops off? I mean, if that happens and people just go stick their head in the sand, then they are totally without excuse. I'm thinking if that thing does pop and God lights up the heavens with it, you can bet that Apophis is going to make a close and personal appearance on April 13th, 2029. Then we'll be on to that last 4 blood moon tetrad, all which will find Jesus being set as the high priest and prince of the earth for his 1,000-year reign. And you get to pick which group you're going to be in. Be it the bride, be it the bride party, be it the guests at the wedding. Your choice. And if you don't know how to get there, there's only one person to ask to help you get there, and that's your Heavenly Father, because he knows how to prepare you to be his son's bride. Bottom line here, folks, triple emphasis. Triple emphasis on the Song of Solomon. Triple emphasis on Rosh Hashanah, on restoring time, restoring God's appointed times. Because when Jesus comes to rule and reign for 1,000 years, it ain't going to be done like it's being done now. He's going to go back and reestablish all these things. The appointed times of God, the sacrifices which were rested. Daniel 9:27, and he confirmed The covenant of Moses with many. Who? Messiah. That's not talking of the Antichrist, it's talking about Messiah. Messiah shall confirm the blood covenant of Moses with many. And in the midst of that week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to rest. Not to end, to rest. The word there for cease in the King James is Sabbath. He shall cause the oblations and the sacrifices to Sabbath, to rest. Why? Because now he is that sacrifice and the oblations that was required under the covenant of Moses. And when he comes back, it says in Ezekiel 40 through 45, the prince shall perform the sacrifices of Passover and tabernacles and the sin offerings and the gift offerings. The prince shall perform these sacrifices. And there's only two princes that could do that. The first being the prince Melchizedek. He is both the prince and the high priest. Jesus is said to be after the lineage of Melchizedek, the prophetic and spiritual lineage, where he is a high priest and he is the prince, the king. And he is performing these because now he's taken these sacrifices and oblations out of its rest and he's performing them because only he can. And I believe he's going to use it as a witness for that 1,000 years of God's plan. Here's the plan. Here's how it's carried out. Here's how I fulfilled it. Here it is again, so you can see all of the above. Here's the witness. Here's the reality of God. And it starts on Rosh Hashanah. And that was the day that Moses cleansed and anointed everything, including the tabernacle of Moses. And he cleansed and he clothed and he anointed the high priest and the priesthood. All on that day. And the presence of God came down so heavily he could not walk into the tabernacle. And oh, by the way, there's strong evidence that suggests that Jesus was baptized on that day. Jesus being the human embodiment of the tabernacle of Moses. The tabernacle, the temple, where the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ dwells. Jesus being that living tabernacle, that living temple. And he was cleansed in the baptism, and he was clothed, so to speak, and the presence of God came down on him just like that day of Rosh Hashanah when Moses performed that. But here at Jesus' baptism, what ascended down upon Christ? The Shekinah glory, the presence of God. Jesus fulfilled Rosh Hashanah, if that's what happened, if he was baptized on Rosh Hashanah. And it appears to be that was the case because 3 days later, on the third day, was the marriage in Cana. Third day of what? Third day of the month of the Aviv. Subtract 3 days from that third day, you're on the first day of the Aviv month, which is Rosh Hashanah, where we see the same Shekinah that came down in Moses' tabernacle coming down on Christ. The typology can't fit any better. And I'll keep reminding you, this video shows you the double emphasis and the triple emphasis. And God is writing it in the heavens. We just need the right key to unlock the locks. And that key is understanding God's vocabulary, which is in the moons. So you dreamers of moons and two moons and blood moons, the blessing of God be upon you. You did receive this from the Lord. I'm convinced of that. There is no other explanation. But we need to practice carefulness and cleverness. Jesus said, be clever as a serpent and gentle as a dove. What? Jesus is going to compare us to serpents? Wants us to be like serpents? No, he wants you to be clever and smart. And don't lose your witness with all this Christian mythology and craziness. Real quick, these dreams about zombies, let's use some God science on this and some cleverness. What do you get when you have people who haven't eaten for I don't know how long, haven't had access to clean water, they're probably fully diseased, possibly suffering from radiation poisoning, emaciated from the lack of food, their hair and teeth are falling out from the radiation, being pummeled by plague, especially now that their immune systems have been diminished from all this pandemic stuff. There's no government to control them because it's destroyed. What would a person under those conditions look like? A zombie. Not the Walking Dead, not some corpse being carried around by some demonic force. No, these are real people who are probably demon-possessed because Satan and his hordes have been kicked out of heaven. They got to reside someplace. You got a bunch of demoniacs, just like the one Jesus ran into and cast a demon out of. This is what mankind's going to look like after 2 or 3 months into the tribulation. This is exactly what you would expect to find because that is reality. Just look at Auschwitz in World War II. Go look up pictures on the internet on it. They looked like zombies. And to make things worse, There's going to be some horrific things going on when they don't find food for 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, into 2 or 3 years. People will eat anything, even each other, as promised in the curses described by God in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. Cannibalism, which has always been the case in severe and horrific areas of famine and war. Not dead corpses eating brain, live people brought to the depth of despair by what this rock Apophis is going to bring. This god of chaos when it hits the earth. This 911 event. The Revelation 911. And we can be in the bride. You can be one in the bridal party. And if that doesn't work, God will work it down to you have an invitation to be at the banquet, which happens long after the bride is taken and the bride and the bridegroom run off to their 7-day Shemitah. Triple emphasis, people. On a double emphasis, you take things twice as serious. On a triple emphasis, you take it 3 times on an exponential level. And it's written in the heavens. I could spend a few more hours filling in the blanks and adding more detail, but I asked the Lord, no one's going to listen to this. People are looking for a 20-minute video, a rapture dream. And I get the gut feeling like the Lord's telling me, ain't your problem. And if they're not willing to invest a few hours to investigate this video, you really think they got the bride's heart? They're like the disciples in the garden. Jesus asked them to pray with him. They fell asleep. Sleepy virgins. So it turned out to be long, and nothing I could do about it because all these rabbit holes, I just kept finding more and more and more. It all focused. And first and foremost and most paramount, the thing to focus on the most and the most seriously is that personal Song of Solomon relationship for our King and our heavenly Solomon. Because you can know all this stuff and not have that relationship, and things could still end badly for you. So seek the Lord. Seek the Lord on that level. Speak those Shulamite words to the heavenly Solomon. And before I go, I'm reminded of the Hebrew betrothal protocol and the actual consummation of the marriage. The groom comes back, snatches away the bride, takes her to his father's house, into the love chambers. It's a 7-day honeymoon. And during that wonderful, glorious 7-day honeymoon, it is said that the bride will dance around her groom 7 times, speaking words of love, of intimacy, of faithfulness, and how she is going to minister these things onto him for all eternity. It's a dance. It's the Song of Solomon dance. And the Lord gave me this song to put on the end of this video. It's self-explanatory. And I will include with it 2 moons that the Lord gave me back a few years that was meant for the bride, that is still meant for the bride, where in my estimation he actually moved the heavens for this thing to be made manifest. 2 moons, shining his heart down on his beloved, on you. I'm going to leave you with those 2 moons I just spoke of. I'm going to leave you with the dance. Maranatha.
You have come over the hills, upon the mountains. To me you have run, my beloved. You captured my heart. With you I will go. You are my love. You are my farewell.